Hey guys,
Hey now.
ROMEOs.
how we doing?
Very good.
Everyone had a good week?
Awesome.
Wow.
So far, so good.
The high point of the week right now, happening right
It's
now.
been super.
Okay.
So,
Superman.
so it wasn't a highway to hell.
Exactly.
Akadaka. All right, guys. Today I thought it'd be interesting in this material world we're living in.
What
to
the
talk-
hell? What day is it?
It's
Like every day, it's
Romeo Day.
Okay. Sorry, I had to do that.
Here are the Romeos.
Okay.
so I wasn't so much looking for somebody to interrupt me or interject in order for Aki to spew out what he just did, but rather say, wait a second, priorities. Let's welcome our viewers and listeners back.
There you go.
welcome.
Thanks for being with us. Thanks for joining us. And today, in this increasingly material world, I'm going to suggest that we talk about whether people should buy or lease, or buy or finance. You guys okay with that?
Let's take a stab at it.
Buy or rent.
Buy or rent, buy or lease, buy or finance. In other
Eh.
words, the idea of purchasing something as opposed to using it as paying for it as a service.
Interesting.
Okay?
That's a nice discussion.
Dominic, given your background and expertise, why don't you get us
I
started?
don't know about that. But obviously, you're going to split or at least divide the things like home, cars. It's different. As far as a home, today, you should rent. However, you buy if you want comfort. But you should rent because as an investment, real estate is not what it used to be. Cars, as far as I'm concerned, because of the complexity of cars, you lease. And you lease for the period of the warranty. That's it.
Wow. I completely disagree.
You completely
All right, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, on the for the home side, I guess it depends. So I'll stick to the car. From my perspective, I would never lease a car. I would never get any brand new car. I will always buy a car that's 2 to 3 years old that is still on warranty, and I will keep it for 2 or 3 years and then sell it because that'll only cost me it'll cost much less than an equivalent lease on a car of equivalent value.
Maybe, okay, but you're still getting a used car.
Yeah.
Yeah, but a used car that's 2 or 3 years old
Yeah.
is not very used.
So you're both looking at this purely from a financial perspective.
Yes.
Definitely.
Okay,
What other ways there to look at it?
Right.
There's whether we agree with it or not. There's oftentimes, depending on the asset, an emotional component for some people.
Okay, I'd rather own than lease a car, 100%, and then I can choose whether I want to keep it for 2 or 3 years.
What about a
or
home?
10 years? Well, so that's a difficult one because it depends on your financial status, whether it's a house or an apartment or a condo. There's a lot of dependencies. For me right now, at this phase of my life, I rent. I don't own anything. I sold my house, and I'm very happy with the way I'm doing.
That's a lifestyle.
So
Correct.
I really question the argument around the better to rent than to buy property. I mean, if you look at rents and the explosion in the cost of rent in the market right now, does that really? I mean, when you do the calculation, it's more advantageous to rent rather than buy a property if you have the means, obviously,
Of course.
to make a down
You know,
payment.
you buy a house today for $1.5 million, let's say, which is about the average.
No, it's not the average. The average house, like in the States, it's about a little over $400,000 US.
Well, maybe, but in our area.
well, first of all, it depends where. When you say
Right.
the States,
The average, I mean, your average neighborhood. average
people in
suburb.
California who may be tuning in are going to say, "What planet is he from?"
Right. California, New York City. I mean, that skews the averages for sure. But I mean, just normally, I mean, the average price is $450,000 to $500,000 for a first time home.
If you invest that money, you're better off investing that money than to buy a house. Look, if you have a family, you don't want to live in an apartment. So it's comfort.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't have a family like Nora at our stage here,
Okay.
So it's interesting. Sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, so financially, your calculation is that paying $2,500 a month, $3,000 for a decent apartment, is a better option than if you have the ability to purchase real estate?
The calculation has always been that rent is more advantageous.
Yeah,
I don't understand that.
Take that $450,000.
Oh, I see. And you put it in the market.
Exactly.
You're assuming someone has that $450,000.
Yeah,
Somebody who's buying a home today.
Yeah, is borrowing it.
Okay.
And is paying
That's it.
a mortgage with.
So I think home ownership has become a fallacy of sorts, because most people, not all, but most people who today are entering the market and purchasing a home, and when I say home, it could be a house, it could be a condo, any property, purchasing a property, will probably never own it.
Yeah, the bank owns most of it.
But I'm saying they probably will never own
You're
it.
right.
Because in the number of years it will take them to pay off that property,
Yeah.
Like in Japan.
right?
Well,
So it's a fallacy.
What about the equity they build in the property?
What equity?
Well, as you reduce your mortgage, that's
So
equity.
that's the other thing that makes me laugh. People say, oh, I bought a home, say, and I'll use the example of $1 million. And yes, it's a lot of money, but it's not unreasonable in today's market. I bought a home for $1 million. You know, I'm building equity. How much down payment did you put on that $1 million home? Today, most people would put down how much on $1 million
Well,
home?
you at least 250,
No.
but they won't.
But they won't.
No, they won't. Most people can't. They don't have 250.
agree.
But you don't buy
Minimum
the
is
$1 million
5%.
home.
Sorry.
In Canada, the minimum is 5%.
That's the minimum. On
So
average.
let's say 10%. Say you put
Okay,
100,000 down.
Right.
You
So
have
they
a
buy a home. They buy a
900,000.
home for $1 million. They're really putting $100,000 towards the purchase of that home, and they're financing $900,000. They're going to pay it. They're going to pay it back over a 30-year period today. 30 years out, how much will that $1 million home have cost them?
4 or 5 million.
Yeah.
How much will they be able to sell the home for in 30 years' time?
There you go.
Financially, how advantageous has it been?
Okay, and on $1 million home, but you also have to be realistic in what, depending on what your means are. You don't buy the $1 million home. You buy a more reasonably priced home. Yeah, I mean, if you're able, like Pat, well, I'm saying, if you're able to pay a 20% down payment on a $500,000 home, that's the example that I'm working with.
No, so we've had conversations in the past where we've touched on this whole concept of living within your means.
Yeah.
We may agree with the concept. We may apply it. Most people in society do not.
That's my argument hinged on that.
Yeah, but
So I think I'm back to the broader topic, right, of whether you should purchase or rent or lease or finance. And there's a financial element, which is probably the most important element that needs to be addressed as part of that decision process. And then there are other considerations. So I'll stick with the example of a home. There's a cost associated, financially and otherwise, with maintaining a home.
True.
So there are people who, and I take myself as an example, I love to tinker. So it's nothing for me to have to address the ongoing maintenance issues with my home. Now, there are certain periodic costs like changing a roof or changing out a furnace, which is going to happen over the lifetime of the home, that I'm going to have to bring in professionals for. Some of the household appliances, there are times when I might be able to repair them myself, and there are times when I may have to call in a professional to do it. But the basic day-to-day maintenance, changing your filter in your HVAC system, the basic maintenance of a home is something that some people take for granted. There are people, and I know of people, who won't do any of that. Those people, regardless of their financial means, should never, ever, ever purchase a home.
agree.
Well, yeah, there's a part of the calculation.
They're not going to maintain it.
There's a percentage that has to be invested or put aside to cover
It's not just
maintenance
financial.
costs.
It's they will not invest the time. They are not inclined to do things like remind yourself or put a reminder in your phone or your calendaring system where every 3 months you have to change the filter in your HVAC system. They won't do it.
Yeah, but that's not the threshold of who should buy a house and who shouldn't. I mean, if they're renting a house, it's the same thing.
If they're renting, no. If they're renting, they may have the luxury of being able to call someone to say, I'm paying so much per month.
Yeah.
You maintain the property for me.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? Not everybody is like-minded in that regard. And I know it's something that often gets overlooked, but I know of people who have the means and absolutely should not own for those reasons, not for financial reasons.
Okay, but I would argue that regardless, whether it's buying a home or you're renting, good financial management, we've discussed this before, is always having, a reserve, in your finances.
Most people don't have reserves
So
today.
let me throw a
People are
concept
maxed out on their credit. So I just, before I throw it back to you, I think that our society has evolved in a way where all things in life are being consumed as a service on a utility-based model. And people fool themselves into thinking that they own things, that they've purchased things, but most of them have not purchased anything. They have entered a contract where they're putting a down payment and then they're financing the asset over a period of time. And the increasing likelihood is that they will never own it over that period of time, whether it's a house or an automobile or other vehicle.
So let me give you a scenario, okay? Let's assume that people approach the home purchase in a reasonable way, very much mindful of what they can afford, all right? They purchase a turnkey, a brand new property in the suburbs somewhere, not in the super expensive cities, but in the suburbs, the emerging suburbs. They have the 20%. They pay $600,000, $500,000, $600,000, for that property with a 20% down payment. Okay, it's a turnkey property, so yes, there should be an allowance. They have to consider also upkeep of the place eventually, but it's a turnkey. So you're telling me that scenario that I just described, that is not a competitive move by somebody?
Well,
it may not be. Some people's mortgage payments the mortgage payments. Again, it depends on what interest rates and so on, but I just come back to your example and just for the sake of simplicity, say that the mortgage payments may be as high as what rent would be on a similar property.
So that would be the threshold.
So now you take the down payment, right, in your example of say $120,000 and say, if I'd taken that $120,000, because that's liquidity that I have, $120,000, and I invest it, and I can achieve a net 8% return on that investment.
Over 30 years?
No, every year.
Yes, but
Average
say an average
over
8%,
right,
over a period of 25 to 30 years.
Right.
What is that 120,000 worth versus I've purchased a home, I put 120,000 as a down payment, I'm now making mortgage payments. By the way, over the 25 or 30 years, I'm going to own this turnkey home, this brand new home. I'm going to have to change the roof. I'm going to have to change the HVAC system. I'm going to have to change most of my household appliances. And I'm going to have to do other maintenance on my home.
Build a fence.
What will the house have cost
You know what? If people
And by the way, I've done the exercise because I have family members who are looking at it and said, you're going to make the decision that is in your best interest. I have nothing to say, but what I can do is help you by providing you with a financial view that allows you to make a more informed decision.
people should do that exercise before they buy a home.
Yes.
Like we do with credit card statements now. We have a law here that they got to show on the credit card statement, if you just pay the minimum, the minimum payment, how many years it's going to take for you to liquidate.
Oh, of course.
If people did that when they buy a house to calculate what it's going to cost by the end of your last dollar of mortgage payment, I think a lot of people would back down.
Now, like many things in life, it's not black and white. It's a shade of gray.
Oh.
So I'm going to come back to your example of buying this turnkey home. So I'm going to add a wrinkle to the exercise. So I move into this home, but I've gone through the financial exercise and I can see that I'm not going to be any further ahead as a homeowner than I would have been if I rented and had invested my $120,000 elsewhere and gotten a decent return for it. But what if I'm willing to take a tenant, right? So I have a home, I have a basement, it's either finished or I can finish it for a reasonable amount of money.
Yeah.
And I rent it out. Now I have a tenant who's going to pay, I don't want a tenant. Say, okay, what you prefer, what you don't prefer in life, knock yourself out. But practically speaking, if you look at it as a financial exercise, you now have someone who's going to help pay off your mortgage much more quickly. And under that scenario, it may make perfect sense for you. Mm-hmm. You may come out ahead of the game. But if the emotions get the better of it, no, I don't want to deal with tenant.
Clearly.
Okay,
Fair point.
I'm not telling you what you should or shouldn't want. I'm just telling you financially, there are different ways to skin this thing.
That's why the valuation in the U.S. is different, because mortgage interest It's deductible.
So that's true in the U.S. I wish more countries
Yeah.
allowed for
Exactly.
that. You know, we're looking at so many different ways. There's so much concern today about the affordability of home ownership for young people. If governments were that concerned with it, the first thing they would do is tell not only young people, but all people, your mortgage payments are tax deductible.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Simple.
Simple. But it would bankrupt an already bankrupt government.
By the way, the other way to look at your example, the 120K, if you get 8% on that, that's going to be around 10K a year, what is it? My brain's not working
It's
too well. It's
9,600.
Exactly. But on a monthly basis, it's going to be what, $800, $900, something like that. In any case, what you could do is take that 120, get that return, and use that to supplement what you're going to be paying as rental. So now you can get a nicer place, if you will, or get a place that's
Always,
that's
but still renting.
subsidized
Yeah.
and renting, because you're still using that 120K. That 120K isn't growing. You're taking the interest out and
Yeah,
using
I
it.
wouldn't advise someone. I understand what you're saying. I wouldn't advise that. I would say put that money to work for you.
Well, of course,
and
I would do the
live,
same,
and
but
live
I'm just
according
saying,
to your means. So, for instance, you take the 120 grand, you're putting it for X% return
Yeah.
in a tax-free type of investment vehicle. That's a wonderful return, right? Over the next 10, 20, 30 years, you're going to generate significant appreciation in your net worth.
Okay. So have we all agreed?
Now, vehicles. Well, we talked about home ownership. And again, it's financially, it may or may not be in someone's best interest. We use the example of someone who has to carry an excessive or a significant mortgage. What if someone has the means to purchase a home? And there are people who have the means to purchase a home.
Very few.
That's not my point. My point is there are people who have the means to purchase
Yes.
a home. Do the math. Go through the financial exercise. You'll find that the outcome is the same.
Yeah.
If you have the means to buy $1 million home cash, does that mean you should buy the home?
Well, again,
Not necessarily.
depends where you are in your life.
And it depends what you look to get out of the home ownership experience.
Exactly.
If you're looking at it as a way to build your equity, I'm going to argue today there are much better ways to build your equity.
Okay, so but if I can afford $1 million home, so I do it differently. I buy a $600,000 home and then I invest with some of my money.
That's not
I do
representative of
both.
how
I cover
people-
both bases.
Look, the fact is, and I understand that there are markets where you can get a very nice home for $500,000, but in most major metropolitan centers
for
today
sure.
in North America,
For sure.
you're getting a pretty modest home for $1 million, right? And it's a sad reality, but it is what it is.
No, not in the big city for sure.
Right? So, guys, the same thing apply. You two use the example of vehicles.
Yeah, vehicles, I would never lease a vehicle. I would always buy. And that's what I've done. And for me, it's worked out well because, I don't put much mileage on my cars. So whenever I sell them, I typically get a pretty good return or value for the car I sell after 2-3 years.
Well, actually, for many years, I've picked up leases from people that cannot afford them anymore.
Okay.
So now,
You're an opportunist.
well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, that's great.
it works out for them, it works out for me. So,
course.
and they would pay me to take it over.
Right.
So it all worked out.
Yeah, I know other people who do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
an
And
interesting
I've done at least 8 or 9 of those.
Okay.
So again, it's a purely financial exercise.
Yeah,
So you get discounted leases, basically.
exactly.
Okay.
So I'm going to throw another wrinkle in. I would say we use the example of a home, and we're turning our attention to other things that you have the option of either purchasing or leasing or renting or financing. So I will say that in my view of the world, with the exception of a home, with the exception of your primary residence, you shouldn't acquire any assets, whether you choose to buy them, lease them, finance them as a utility, unless you can afford them. In other words, unless you can afford to pay for it cash, which doesn't mean that you will, but unless you can afford to pay for it cash, you should not be acquiring that asset. So I say that because in the example of a vehicle, if I have $25,000 or $30,000 available to put towards the purchase of a vehicle, I go through the financial exercise. Is it in my best interest to acquire the vehicle, to purchase it outright, or is it in my best interest to finance it, to lease it, to rent, to finance it or lease it? That's not how most people work. Most people have $1,000 to their name and they're looking at $30,000 vehicles. Well, from the get-go, there's no purchase option here.
No,
the only way I can acquire a 30,000 vehicle is by financing it. You should not be financing a $30,000 vehicle if you have $1,000 to your name.
No, but it's not just about $1,000 in your name. I mean, if you also have a certain salary level, that's also part of the calculation. That
Less so.
okay. So I
Less so.
Okay, so
Because you're committing to spending money that you don't have the means to pay for today. You'll never get yourself out of the hole. I don't care if you earn $100,000 a year, $200,000 a year, $500,000 a year.
Especially for a depreciable asset.
No,
It
I know.
doesn't make sense.
I know, but if you have the salary, what I'm saying is that there is a possibility, and it does make sense to me. If you have a certain level of salary, so you can't afford maybe the car, you can't afford to buy the car that you want to buy. Okay, I'm not talking about. And I'm assuming here. I'm talking about reasonable examples. You're not trying to buy a Rolls Royce, yeah. So what I'm saying is that that it's possible that with a certain level of salary, you buy a nice car, which you probably would not be able to afford to pay for in cash.
Yeah.
But you have your 4-year lease. You do the calculation. It's well within your means, the monthly payments, and you have for 4 years. You have you have a really nice car that you're able to pay off.
So I'm gonna argue
But you're not paying it
strongly.
off.
But you're paying off your lease.
No,
you understand?
So I'm going to argue
For 4
strongly
years.
that you're trying to buy a slice of happiness. You think that
Yes, that's
acquiring
exactly
that
it.
vehicle
What's
is going to
wrong with
make
that?
you happy.
Yeah.
What's wrong with it is that financially you're making a grave mistake. So what you should do if you earn a good salary is take some of that salary and put it aside and have it work for you until such time as you've saved up enough money that you can now afford to purchase that vehicle if you so desire.
in cash.
Okay, but my salary,
Which doesn't mean that you'll purchase it cash.
No, but at
But
least
you have the option
money.
of purchasing
right,
it cash.
but the scenario that I'm talking about is, Pat, that where the car payments, the lease payments are a very small fraction of your income.
Yeah, but monthly payment, you don't know
No.
what's going to happen in 4 years.
No.
No, but I mean over 4 years.
You're taking a commitment.
You should never take on, that's debt. You should never take on debt, in my opinion, unless you're in a crisis situation and you have no choice. And I mean a true crisis situation, or if it's to put towards the purchase of a primary residence.
Okay. Okay. All I'm saying is that I think I understand what you're saying.
So people who borrow money to invest, for instance, people who invest on margin,
Dangerous.
right? You say, yeah, but the stock market is producing returns of 15, 20%. I want to invest on margin. Yeah,
I do that for tax savings, but
for
anyway.
tax savings.
So all I-
Why? To write off your interest?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Have you ever gotten yourself in a pickle?
3 years ago, I did. But,
Okay.
but now I'm much lower on the amount of margin.
Well, I can tell you that there are people who invest on margin who have gotten themselves in such serious predicaments, they've lost everything.
No, I know.
Everything.
Yeah, because there's no limit to what you can lose.
And there's no limit to greed.
Okay. So what your argument is that the example that I just gave, you made a very good argument to say why financially, it's not a good move. But in terms of just the reality, the day-to-day living, I see that as a situation. I have the car. I have a decent car. I'm able to over 4 years. I understand. I'm not the owner of the car, but over 4 years, I have the use of a really nice vehicle. I can afford it, and I can still, I can also continue to have my other priorities, financial priorities. So I'm investing my money in the market. I'm putting money aside, and I'm paying for this car over 4 years. What is wrong with that?
It's a choice.
It's a choice,
There's
yeah.
nothing wrong with it.
Okay.
The only thing the only comment I'll make to that is, first of all, you don't own the car. You're only leasing it.
We agree.
The other thing is you're taking on a 4-year commitment for that cash flow, and you don't know what's going to happen in years 2, 3, and 4 in your life.
That's why I come in.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Well,
I pick up the
That's when you
leases.
sell the lease to him at a discount.
So all kidding aside, yeah, and I agree with you, but all kidding aside, the fact that Dominic is able to do what he does,
Yeah, it means people screwed up.
for sure.
and the fact is that you have a large proportion today of people in our society who are living well beyond their means.
Yeah,
So
and
most
leases
people who are
one-
making their car payments say, "Oh, I can afford to make these car payments."
today.
No, You probably shouldn't. Debt is terrible.
Yeah.
Debt is terrible. We should be instilling a level of financial literacy in people at a young age to help them understand how to avoid getting in financial difficulty throughout their lives. And you know, the example you give of the person who earns a certain salary, and so what's wrong with putting, you know, X amount of dollars towards leasing a vehicle? It's going to make them feel good about themselves. You got to feel good about yourself throughout life. So when you get to the age of 65 or 70, and you'd like to be able to maybe make a change in your life where you're no longer spending most of your days earning a living or working to earn a living, but having the means to retire and do whatever the hell you choose to do any given day. And you say, oh, you know, some of the decisions I made in my 20s and 30s and 40s don't afford me that luxury today. But if you had been much more reasonable in how you manage your finances and what you spent money on along the way, there's a higher likelihood that you would have that luxury.
You're a financial purist, to your credit, and I applaud you. You're a financial purist. All I'm talking about is reality, and I'm talking about, you know, how people, average people, the average salaries can have a quality of life and can make it work. So I'm proposing there's a way of making it work.
They don't make it work.
Okay, guys, let me give you my I guess my story, as it were, because in my 20s and 30s, as I was starting out and I got married and I had a young family and everything, I got into the trap of the low monthly payment. And I ended up at a certain point, and I was in my 30s, where I noticed that, because I was earning, by that time, I was earning a fairly decent salary and you know, I was doing okay. And my ex was working as well, and we were doing okay financially. But I noticed that so we had a lease for her car, you know, there was just so many things that we had purchased, but not purchased as you know, outright, rather
You didn't own them.
We didn't own them. So it was about leasing. It was about, you know, monthly payments for this. Oh, let's do a layaway plan. Oh, let's get a new living room. Oh, we'll do it on a layaway plan. We'll do this, we'll do that. All of a sudden, those little, you know, oh, this is only $20 a month. Oh, this is only $70 a month. This is only $120 a month. This lease is only $220 or whatever. After you added up all those things, and it's like all of a sudden, holy shit, like 80% of my salary is being eaten up by these, you know, low monthly payments. And all of a sudden my cash flow was crap. And at a certain point I said, okay, this has got to stop. And I ended up, I paid off as many things as I could, as quickly as I could. And I got to a point where cash flow became really important to me. And I learned that in my 30s, and I kept going. At that point, right after that, I never wanted to lease another car. I never wanted to do anything but outright purchase, because I did not want any monthly payments anymore.
It's like those deals there. Don't pay for 12 months.
Exactly.
Do you know when it gets to the 12th month?
Of course.
What the percentage of people don't have the money, and then the finance kicks in?
Exactly.
It's like 90%.
Yeah, that's why they do it. I mean,
Yes, exactly.
You don't even have to wait 12 months.
Yeah.
Most people who make credit card purchases are incapable of paying off their credit card statement when it arrives.
And some of them think that by paying the minimum, oh, I paid my credit card. I paid my credit card this month.
No, of course.
No,
Of course.
you paid the minimum. You didn't pay your credit card.
and
you
you're
know?
paying 20% plus interest.
Well, more, yeah.
Yeah.
So, but
No, there's a complete lack of financial discipline in a society
That was me. That was
But
me.
I'm saying in society today,
Yeah.
there's a fundamental lack of financial discipline
No one
and
teaches
know-how.
you. No one teaches. That's why.
Well, and no one's interested, because today there are so many resources available online, but people are you know, more willing to invest in social media and mindless entertainment than they are in spending, you know, an hour a week or 2 hours a week on a site that's going to help them build their financial literacy. There are great resources available.
They'll buy crypto and go to Robinhood and get the next meme stock. And yeah.
remember years ago,
So in a society that's increasingly entitled, you know, and has this attitude of why not me? Why can't I have all these wonderful things in life? And they think that it's going to bring them happiness. We've moved to what I call a utility-based model. Pay as you go.
remember years ago there were many commercials on TV about renting TVs,
Yes.
appliances.
Yes.
That seems to have disappeared, huh? Like we don't see that as much.
Because they're so much cheaper now, I think. Because back in the day, TVs weren't cheap. Now
Yeah,
you can
probably.
buy these huge
No, but
screens
it
for
was
like
also
a couple $100.
But it was also at a time when people didn't think that way. It was, I'm going to buy a TV. Oh, no, we're going to plant the seed. You have the opportunity to rent your TV. Today, you don't have to do that. People instinctively today know that anything they want to acquire, they can acquire on payment, on a payment plan.
That's true.
Anything.
Yeah, and a credit card is a payment plan
you're
as
right.
well. Right?
Of course.
Yeah, with your minimum payment.
It's the ultimate. It's the ultimate payment plan.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, for the credit card company.
At least now they're forced to, for how many years it would take.
It doesn't change people's behavior.
Yeah, probably.
They're more informed,
Yeah.
but it doesn't change their behavior.
They probably don't even look at it.
So we're all, I think more or less all of us are saying the same thing. Maybe Aki. So for a principal residence perspective, you're still saying buying is okay or mortgages are okay, depending on what you want.
Well, no, it depends on the mortgage. If somebody's telling me, if somebody's telling me, I'm buying this home valued at X, I'm putting this much down. That level of down payment means you have to take mortgage insurance. It means that you're going to be paying it off in 30 years. Do the math. It doesn't make sense. No. It doesn't make sense.
Okay, but
right? If you can purchase a home and you'll pay it off in 10 years or in 15 years, right? And maybe go out as much as 20 years, and you do the financial exercise. You say, you know what? Best case scenario, I'm going to come out slightly ahead than if I had taken another course. Worst case scenario, whatever I'm going to have to pay and invest in this home, it's likely that the home will be worth that in 10, 15, 20 years' time. Then it becomes not so much a financial decision, but do you want to own a home?
Yeah.
And I'm fine with that. And I'm also saying that with the exception of a home, and I say home, a primary residence, you should not buy anything unless you have the means to pay for it up front. It doesn't mean that you should necessarily pay for it up front.
You just should have the means.
But you should have the means.
Yeah, but that's going to shut down consumer spending in your economy. I mean, most people...
I'm not looking at what's the best interest of merchants and governments. I'm saying as far as individuals are concerned.
Most people cannot meet that standard. That's the reality.
No, most people choose not to meet that standard.
I think most
because they want to enjoy a lifestyle
they want it now.
that exceeds their means.
But most people don't
now. They don't want to wait for it.
They want it now, and they want more
now
than they have or they can afford realistically.
Yeah.
That's the issue.
That's part of it. That is definitely part of it. But what I'm saying is there's an argument to be made where most people, because of their salaries, because of their income standing, they just don't have the ability to be able to have the money in hand for everything that they need to purchase.
So at what point in their lives, because the years during which you're going to earn an income by working is somewhere from your late teens, early 20s until your early to mid 60s, generally speaking. There's some people today increasingly have to work into their 70s because of the problem I'm trying to outline here. Yeah. So we're looking at a generation where they won't have the means well into their 80s. Do they plan on working into their 80s? Are they going to be able to work into their 80s?
Yeah. All I'm saying, Pat, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. That's the ideal that what you're talking about. That is good financial management, good financial literacy. Totally. But I am saying is that there is still another avenue, which is people of a certain means, if they still, if they're bright about their calculations, there is a way for them to be able to make ends meet and to have like a decent quality of life and to carry some debt. But there is evidence of being able to draw down that debt. Okay, I'm saying that's possible.
So I know people, for instance, in their 60s, in their mid 60s today, who are borrowing against the equity that has built up in their homes. So they supposedly purchased a home when they were in their 30s. They're now in their mid 60s, and they can't afford their lifestyle. So you know what they do? They borrow against the appreciation in the value of their home.
Well, no, I agree.
Isn't that what Tom Selleck is selling?
The reverse mortgage?
Yeah, I don't understand that.
There's reverse mortgage, there's second mortgages, and there's a
line of credits and whatever.
Right.
So the reverse mortgage, if we can just for a second look at reverse mortgages, right? Okay. I don't understand, like, where's the profit for the company? So because you don't pay interest, right? Or am I wrong? Am I misunderstanding it? So you take out a reverse mortgage, but you as the homeowner, the way they advertise it, you're not paying any interest on that reverse mortgage, correct?
So here's the basic concept.
So what's the catch here?
Here's the basic concept, whether it's a reverse mortgage or some of the other instruments we talked about. So over an ownership period of X number of years, you acquired an asset that has appreciated in value.
Or you paid it off. You're retired.
It doesn't matter. It appreciated in value.
Okay.
Right? Now you find yourself at a stage of life where you say, oh, okay, I've got some equity in this asset, but I don't have money to pay for my day-to-day expenses. Oh, here's an idea. I'm actually going to borrow against the equity I've built up in my home, or I'm going to draw down the equity in my home as a means of generating cash that's going to allow me to cover my day-to-day living expenses.
Yep.
And how many years do you plan on doing that for? Because today, any sound financial planning requires that people envision living until at least the age of 90. At least. And say, okay, so if I want to look at how I'm going to live, not at 30 and 40 years old, driving fancy cars and telling my friends I own a house, but between the ages of 65, 70, and 90, how do I intend, or how do I plan to live? How do I plan to pay for my living expenses when I no longer have working income? So any way you slice it, there's this notion that in the later stages of life, you're going to be drawing down on the equity you've built up over life, not having certainty around how long you're going to live, what your needs are going to be. You know, say you have to be placed in a home because of failing health.
Yeah.
What is that going to cost you?
Yeah.
Or if you want to remain in your home and have in-home care, what is that going to cost you?
Right. Okay. So,
right? And you're taking all those options off the table from the get-go because you had this need in your 30s or 40s to have a certain car or brag that you bought a certain home or live in a certain neighborhood.
okay.
It's short-sighted, and I get that, you know, young people don't think about their future, but again, we have a responsibility to at least encourage young people to think about these things.
Yes. Okay. So let me go back to an example. So let's say you're retired, you paid off your home, and you're a homeowner in an expensive real estate market like Vancouver, Canada, and your home is $1.2 million, right?
It's not much of a home in Vancouver.
Well, 1.5. Choose it. What's realistic in Vancouver?
3 million, 4 million.
Okay, even better. So let's say, I mean, first of all, when this option of reverse mortgages, does the consumer choose how much of that equity they're willing to put into play? So in the example that I'm giving, if the person says 10% of equity of my home is what I'd like to use as a reverse mortgage, so that $100,000 is more than enough for me to be able to cover my costs and live, and that's only 10% of the equity of my home. So I still have the biggest chunk, the value of my home in Vancouver. Is that not a fair situation?
Not really, because I'll say that for that person, you know, the first question I would have is, what are your annual living costs?
Yeah, and how quickly are you going to draw down on the equity of your home? I mean, there's a lot of questions. For some people, it's not a bad. For some people, that's they can do it, and it works for them,
right?
And it's going to help them out in the at the the back end of their lives.
So look, I use a simple example. Let's take a valuation of $1.5 million on a home, but your living costs are $100,000 a year.
Yeah, that's only 15 years.
It's 15 years.
Yeah, and that's if you're 65.
And by the way, when we say it's 15 years, it's less than 15 years, because if your living costs today are $100,000 a year,
they're going to go up.
With the cost of living increases year after year, you're not going to get to your.
Yeah, but the value of your home is going to go up too.
No, it's going down. It's not the value of your home; it's what you have in your home.
The equity of your home is going
down.
No, but
I mean, but the actual value of your home in a strong real estate market,
it may or may
will
not
appreciate.
I mean,
will be appreciating. I mean, that's
but not at the same rate.
So how does the company, the reverse mortgage company, where do they make their money? They acquire stakes in these properties. Is that it? And it's just that's how they build their assets. That's how they make their money. I don't understand the angle from the company side.
It's the reverse scenario of when you take out a mortgage.
Yeah, it's a second mortgage without paying interest. So they're
So how are they making money? Where's the profit?
They have a lien on your
Yeah.
house.
That's what it is.
yeah.
Of course.
They have a lien on your house
They have
at
a
that
lien
point.
for the 10%, like the example that we
or
gave.
whatever amount
Okay.
that you're taking
Okay.
out, but they have
So,
a lien on your house. Yeah.
Is it not? I mean, it's not such a bad deal in a situation.
Well, you're going to
Well,
have to sell
it's
the
a
house.
terrible idea.
You have
Really?
to sell the house at a certain point. So what ends up closing
Yes.
the lease is you sell your house,
Yeah.
and then you pay them back what you've
The
taken
10%.
back.
So the example I gave. So the 10% equity that they
Or
take
10
a
or
mortgage
20 or
on.
what-
No,
whatever.
by then it won't be 10%. You're taking out. It's not a one-time thing.
Okay. I'm trying to understand it. So it's not. So if the agreement that I have is I'm going to use 10%, I'm drawing on 10% of my equity for this reverse mortgage with the company. That's the agreement that I have with
It
them.
starts at 10%.
And then what happens? I'm just trying to understand this. That's why I'm very curious because it seems to be so popular, and it's like
No, it's not. It's not that popular.
okay, all right. It just seems
It's
like
not that popular.
like a fair deal for the consumer.
No, and
is what
let's face it. Why are people doing it? People are doing it because they've gotten themselves in a financial pickle.
Yeah. It's
That poor financial planning, life circumstances, whatever. They reach a stage in life
and do you think
where
by-
they can no longer earn money through work.
Yeah, and do you think, by the way, that that's going to change? So the other thing is now it gives you a bit of a windfall, right? So now I got myself a reverse mortgage. Now I have access to $1 million of equity in my home because I just signed up with this company and I have this available to me.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think all of a sudden they're going to stop spending and be prudent? Or do you think all their lives they've gotten to themselves to a point where they've had to do this because of all the bad
Okay, but-
decisions they've made all throughout their
Right.
lives?
Well, of course, because the other option would be sell your home,
Exactly, and
live,
lower.
rent a place that you can afford,
Exactly.
and invest
And
the rest
invest
of the
the money.
money and use it in order to live the life that.
Exactly.
or I can use this to acquire extra cash, which then I will invest in the markets.
Use what? What?
The reverse equity. The reverse
What are you
equity.
talking about?
You're paying interest on that. Why would you? Why
But what
would
do you?
do
This
that?
is what I'm saying. Are you paying interest? Again,
No, you're not.
You're not paying interest. You just established that. So I have additional cash that's coming in through this equity. And let's say I'm prudent. I'm cheap. I have I spend very little money. My living costs are very low. I use this as a tool to get additional money.
Why are you using this
to put it in the
tool?
market?
You're using this tool because you don't have the financial means to cover your day-to-day living
Exactly.
expenses.
But it's up to
It's not because I'm going to use the money and invest it
no.
elsewhere.
But isn't it possible that a consumer is looking at this as a way of generating?
No, somebody would look at it that way, would say, I'm going to downsize. I'm going to go from $1.5 million home to $1 million home. I'm going to take a $500,000 profit I make on my home, and I'm going to invest
And
that.
If you notice that the angle that they use is that you can stay in your home.
Yeah.
So that's the angle that they
Yes, but the angle doesn't also tell you, but it's no longer your home.
exactly.
But no, but 10%. How is that? Again, if you can, big ifs here. Maybe we don't know enough about it. But if you can determine that it's only going to be 10% of the equity that's going to be put into play here, I still
It's
have
not.
90%. Oh, it's not. Okay, that's what
You're
I'm asking.
starting a process of drawing down equity in your home. So year after year, you're going to take more and more equity out of your home for you get to stay in your home promise.
Exactly.
But it's no longer your home.
Okay.
People are doing it because they can no longer afford to cover their living
Okay.
expenses.
I'm assuming your real estate value is appreciating.
Ah,
Your equity
you're
remains.
making-
I'm
You're
curious
taking
about what
a
you said.
gamble.
There's no-
I'm taking gamble.
The company
Okay.
that's giving you this this thing, they're not taking any interest.
No.
So
Well, that's it.
So okay, I take
a stake.
I take $500,000
Reverse mortgage.
reverse mortgage out of the house. I owe them only $500,000.
yeah. Well,
So
they,
when the house
own-
gets sold,
they own.
they own
they own $500,000
they-
of your house.
They have $500,000 invested
Lien.
in an asset,
Exactly.
Lien.
Yes.
and they will make a return
Well, what's the return that they're making then?
on whatever the appreciation is
exactly.
on that particular
I think it's a
asset.
good.
Well, no, but that $500,000 remains $500,000.
No,
No.
it's an ownership position.
Right, but it's a dollar value, not a percentage.
So
No.
I guess if your home
So
appreciates.
then I'm not getting it.
So
either
Nuran,
because-
my understanding is, and you guys
Yeah.
can correct me, this if your home appreciates by 20%, right? When you decide to sell it, it appreciates by 20%. Then that 500,000, then the company will be collecting $500,000 plus their share of the appreciation. So 500,000 plus 20%. Sorry, is that about how it works?
Yeah.
How do you determine that appreciation value then?
Oh,
By the market.
They have
models.
they have smart people.
They have
So what they do
models.
is they
who
value
are
the
modeling it.
So what they do
and
is
the
they
same way
provide
when you buy a
valuation.
life insurance, there are people who are
Got you. So now I see where
figuring
they
out-
make the money. They're doing the valuation of your home, the
Exactly.
total value of your home when you get the mortgage. They're taking a percentage of it, and then they're getting.
It's like a
the
second
upside.
mortgage without paying the interest.
Right,
Without
but
paying
the interest is based on the valuation.
But you
assessment.
can limit it to a certain level of equity.
So I
So like,
understand.
it's always 10%.
no people.
It's a
Again, you have to
take
understand
out.
that people who are going down that path are doing so because they can no longer cover their living expenses.
Or why is it so unthinkable that maybe it is a nice convenient way for somebody who's at the end of their career, who's retired, who has a certain level of income, they're living within their pension income.
then
I
they
don't
wouldn't
know.
need that. They wouldn't need to.
Well,
do
no,
that.
they
That's
want to
what
do
I mean.
more. I don't know. They want to.
Well,
be
then
able to
just
access
get a
They're
home
not
that.
living comfortably.
Get a home equity line of credit and pull that money
That's
out.
what
that
I'm
way.
asking.
Sell the
That's what I'm
frickin'
saying.
sell the
That's
home.
what I'm saying.
Okay,
Thank
well,
you.
then if you need to do that, you can do that. But what you're doing is you're
Don't
basically
take on debt.
That's
Do
what-
not,
Okay.
at
You're
65,
the-
70, 80 years old, you're taking on debt. Are you out of your freaking
I
mind?
know,
Exactly.
but it's
Are you
backed
out
up.
of your mind?
But it's backed up by the appreciating value of my home.
It's debt.
Okay, well, you're a purist, like I
Strike
said.
it from your vocabulary.
All right.
Exactly.
Yes.
Especially at that age.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Hey, I sold my house and I'm renting now, so
You're debt free.
I am definitely debt free.
Debt free.
Yeah, at 65, you should be getting debt or,
Okay, okay.
or syphilis.
You know, the problem with the problem with a lot of folks is they focus on one side of the balance sheet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why they use you can stay in your home. You can remain. That's the selling point. People, that's how they get
At a
them.
certain age, you don't want to leave your
You
home.
can't afford to, but we're going to show you how.
Exactly.
There you go.
No, terrible.
Magnum PI.
Yeah, Tom Selleck, absolutely.
Okay, so we all decided.
So we spend a lot of time on homes, with a little bit less time on vehicles
Yeah,
and
vehicles.
some furniture
Yeah.
and other household items. And
don't have
it
a monthly
it
payment.
applies to vacations, right?
Oh my God, yeah.
That is my pet.
Timeshares. We haven't talked about timeshares. yet. Is that still a
That
thing?
is my pet peeve. You borrow
Terrible.
money to go on vacation, and then you go on vacation, you come back, you're going to pay for that.
Yeah.
Oh, that would kill me.
But it all stems from the same
Yeah.
thing. It's a sense of
Yeah.
entitlement.
Yeah.
Why not me? Why can't I have all these wonderful things?
Exactly.
You guys are all spoiled. Sorry.
And whose fault is that?
I spoil my kids. Yeah, I'm sorry. Damn it.
Oh, they'll forgive you and say, "Keep doing it, Dad. Keep doing it."
I like to get the comments from his kids. Is
And,
that
and
true?
by the way, so I would say we harp on today's younger generation, say our kids' ages, but it really starts with our generation.
Well, yeah, but we just talked about it.
Our parents, I would say, were the last reasonable
Purists.
generation
The last
for the
of the
most
Mohicans.
part.
yeah, but this whole mortgage, reverse mortgage, who are they catering to? The retired
You.
baby boomers.
Aki, if they come calling, if
I
they knock
think
on
it's
your door,
interesting.
Tell
you
them to
say,
go fuck
"Hold
off."
on,
Okay, I'll
let me
call
put
you.
you on hold. I got to get Dominic on the ring."
Pat Wade and
The
Dominic.
Romeos.
My goodness.
Yeah. I was
Okay.
just,
So I'm not sure we've accomplished anything or solved anything other than offering a bit of advice.
think
I think it was educative.
I think we accomplished and solved it.
We yelled at each other. That was fun.
Right?
Well, I think it's fair to say Aki listened.
Yes, I did.
I don't know if anyone in the
I'm
audience.
going to be exploring this chip reverse mortgage. I'm interested. I think there's something
Okay,
that can be
you know what?
taken
I'll
advantage
hold
of
him,
here.
I'll hold him. You punch him.
Well, you know what? We'll send you the paperwork. We'll give
Oh, my
you.
Muhammad Ali.
You know what? I'm going to finance it for you.
Exactly.
Hey, this is on the
That's
record.
what I'm saying.
I got one of those.
on the
I got
public
another
record.
one.
On the public record.
Oh my gosh.
Well,
And you're going to be an opportunist. If somebody has made a mistake with his car lease, hey, that's where I come in.
there you go. The vulture.
I love it.
For those of you out there who are having difficulties making your car payments, we will post Dominic's
Talk to Dominic.
coordinates. Yeah. All right, guys. Interesting conversation.
Yes.
Anything any one of you wants to add?
I'm hungry.
Sounds good.
Hungry for a mortgage.
Free enterprise works.
Do
It
your
does.
do your calculations.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
all your calculations. Don't look at one side. Don't look for just 5 years. Up to the end.
Yeah,
And that will give you the real picture.
And to be fair, I mean, if you don't know where to start because you don't feel you have the knowledge or the skills, reach out. There are lots of people out there who who can help.
Yeah.
Right? And not the opportunists who are trying to reel you in.
Exactly.
Not
All
Tom
right.
Selleck.
Yeah. All right.
We lost Tom Selleck. We apologize, Mr. Selleck.
Okay. If you enjoyed this or anything else we do, please give us a like. Please subscribe. And we'll look forward to having you join us next week. Have a great one.
Thank you.
Guys.
Bye.